I am. Well, I'm trying to get a recording, but it keeps insisting on waiting till the health checks are complete. Hold on, I have an idea. What is a health check?
I don't like that. I feel like you're going to get a knock on the door in a second, and some nice guy's going to come up with like a gas mask.
You should know that these could not.
He's going to take your blood and then send it to 23andMe to make sure you're a real American. Just doing a health and safety check, sir.
I'm a non-hyphenated American.
Yeah.
I mean, as you can probably tell from my last name, I am in fact a very hyphenated American. So,
do you say Padusniak?
Beautiful, yes. Chase Padusniak, and you should hear when I graduated high school. They called me up, they came in front of the whole school and called me Chaz Padusniak.
Nice. I kind of like that. And then you got the whole lore of the Padusky boys and how they're, in and out of jail. I can see it. Well,
I will say that to this day, my letterbox name is Chaz Padusky. So if anyone wants to find me on there, you can find me at Chaz Padusky.
Do you ever play basketball? Be Chaz Padusky?
I did play basketball.
All right.
But the only place I was ever able to do it with any success was the UK, because Americans are too tall and good. But the pasty Anglo race was unfortunately not up for the task.
All right. You padunked on them.
Yeah, I did. No, unfortunately, at a meager 6 feet tall, there was no dunking to be had.
Okay. So you got your doctorate, right? You're an English doctorate.
I am, though.
A doctor of English.
I'm a doctor of philosophy of English. I once went to a job interview and someone was like, "What the fuck does this mean?"
It means, I know words good is what it means.
I could say a thing or two about religion in Central and Northern Europe between about 1100 and 1500.
Well, what a coincidence. That's exactly what we need the doctor for. Do you know a bunch of like banger monastic chants? Like some hits?
Do I? I mean, there's the classic is, of course, the Dies Irae, the Day of Wrath. Dies Irae, Dies Irae. You know that one. But I'm not a deep cuts boy. I can't sing.
You like the classics.
Not this
hipster,
Abbey Road.
Hipster indie monasticism. That's actually not true. You love the hipster indie monasticism, don't you?
That was sort of
that's kind
what
of
I
the
wrote
topic.
the dissertation on. Yeah.
All right. Howdy, listeners. I'm Fritz, and this is The State Between Us. And this is one of those episodes where, I ask myself, when I need a break from this horrible century for a minute, is it possible to overshoot a little? It's possible. But I think we all need a fucking break. Things aren't going great. The free listeners get a break. The patrons later will get too much contemporary shit. This is an extreme month. We're going with the extreme. I'm an extremist this month. So if next time I try to cross the border, I got that.
Fritz is joining the Boogaloo Boys.
That's
Sorry.
right. No, well, that one might get me through the border. Maybe that's not the worst one. So I got like as far as like getting into pre modern history, I got a good hit last week with the Masaniello and the big party he threw in Naples in the 17th century, but I needed more. I needed something stronger. I needed that fucking uncut mystical shit that only a medievalist's got. So imagine my delight to learn that someone who knows a thing or two about the prehistory of class and rule and medieval Christian mysticism not only listens to this show, but is getting, hopefully getting nearish to publishing a fucking book about it. No?
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, knocking on the wood of the cross here. And
light some candles, please.
Yes. And not only that, but also has his own podcast coming out soon with what sound like some pretty big gets as far as guests goes. And it's all about film. So Chase, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, what I missed, what your scholarly work's been on, and talk about this podcast you got brewing too, and when we can hear it and all that. And then we'll get into the meat and potatoes today.
Thank you so much, Fritz. So no dicks on sticks this week, unfortunately. I can't offer any of that. There are going to be some
about this.
Well, the dicks do stay attached to the bodies, and there's only one dick in the whole dissertation, so I'm sorry. But my name is Chase Padusniak. I wrote a dissertation, earning a PhD, a much vaunted Doctor of Philosophy of English.
Hell yes.
Called The Place of Mysticism in the Later Middle Ages. I guess this conversation is going to be about that, so I don't want to give more than a taste, but it's more or less about the relationship between the mystical and kind of proto-revolutionary or politics or kind of social upheaval. And the podcast is called Death is a Photograph, Culture at the End of History. Bit of a mouthful. I tend to just call it Death Photo Pod or Death is a Photograph.
I would never walk into a death photo pod.
No, well, I think Fry does in the first episode of Futurama.
Exactly what I was thinking about.
Ah, man, that show has done so much for me in my life. I think that's how I learned who Richard Nixon was. But anyway, I was introducing myself. And that is a podcast about basically mid to late 20th into 21st century culture. My co-host Sam and I sort of just got really interested in how when we were growing up in the 90s and 2000s, there was this real sense that all history was kind of boomer history, that it all descended from Woodstock and the Monterey Pop Festival and the hippies and whatever and the Weather Underground. And we kind of thought, well, what would it mean to think the 20th century, bracketing that a little bit? So our first season is on Gen X and sort of their emergence into this post-Soviet moment. We're looking at films mostly, but I think it's going to expand, and later seasons will be on other aspects of that time and stuff.
Gen X. I got Gen X media. I will definitely be listening to this podcast. It's got a weird spot in my body. All of it. I mean, it needs some analysis. It definitely does. And
I do
placement in history.
I'll give the listeners a little preview of how I came up with the idea that maybe will help make sense of that a little bit. We'll see. So I was watching this little documentary called Dirty Girls, which is not what it sounds like. It is
I swear,
short film on YouTube about this group of girls who are sort of outsiders at their high school in California in like the mid-late 90s. I want to say it's 97, 98, something like that. And they're called the Dirty Girls because they're not showering. They're kind of punkish, all of these things. And it's a really good like little snapshot of elder millennials, kind of young Gen Xers, at that point, basically elder millennials, in high school and what it is that being transgressive means to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I made a bet with my wife, who was watching it with me, that if I found them on Instagram, they would all be really big Kamala supporters. And I was to a person correct. And I got really interested in I then reread the film through the knowledge that that's where they would end up. And I feel like it made me hear things I wouldn't have otherwise heard.
Oh, yeah. All right. I hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then I was like, okay.
Fucking interesting. All right.
Oh, and due out probably early fall, but you can, if you want to know more, you can email us at deathphotopod@gmail.com. So
you guys going to put up a website, Patreon, anything like that?
There is a patreon.com/deathphotopod. You will be greeted with a big picture of Francis Fukuyama's face.
There you go. There you go. That's the place to go for sure. All right.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. So I don't know how far into all these characters we'll get today, but Chase is going to also do a tavern meeting with us, I think. Yeah, at some point later in the month.
I'll bring the beer. Let's do it.
Yeah, all right. And then we can get a little looser and pick up anything we left behind here and take listener questions and stuff like that. And just I might even resuscitate the soundboard depending on Chase's threshold for extreme annoyance.
Oh, you'd be. I would say I'm probably the annoying person in my life, to those around me.
We'll see.
I wish you luck.
We shall see. I take that challenge. For this episode, for this interview, I think it'll be good and weird and fun if you're listening, and if you're that kind of nerd, to think about what in these stories that you're about to hear today represent relationships of class and rule that might even border on the untranslatable, and which ones have more of a durable and lasting sort of presence, or at least are more, easy to understand. But at any rate, what I want to talk about is, I think first, maybe if you're okay with this order, the sort of bizarre, and this is what really actually got me, was this Norwich situation that you write about. So there's this bizarre political economic situation in Norwich in the 15th century that is seen through the eyes of this medieval Christian version of an oracle. Yeah. An anchorite, a woman, I think her name is Julianne. Is that correct? Or Julian?
Yep.
Julian.
No, Julian. Julian's good. Yeah.
All right. And how and she's trying to like make sense of these sort of new class and political antagonisms inside Norwich, which is this completely walled, defensive city. And it's very D&D. I love it as a setting. I think the sorts of, what do you call these fucking things? Factions that you could join in this are just...
The Bachelorie.
Yeah. Dude, it's great for this. But there is this woman named Julian who tries to make sense of all of this from her sort of cloistered position, possibly in like a box.
She is basically in like a very nicely, a kind of ornate box.
Yes. Yeah. And so she's not even in, we'll get to that. But that's one of the things I really want to talk about. And the other one, and then I think we'll definitely have time to get into the Low Countries of I think that was a century, that's like the 14th century that you wrote about, I think, in the Low Countries, right?
Yeah. That part overlaps with Julian a little more than the other part does. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then we've got guilds, we've got rebellions, we've got these kind of lay sororities. I believe they're pronounced the Beganies.
Beggins or Beggines would be the most common.
Yeah, you ever been out to the Beganies? They're in Jersey.
My aunt and uncle live in the Beganies over here, and they do not like trespassers. Do not go there.
No. So but these things could be, I mean, they meant a lot of things, but they could also be urban mutual aid societies in some settings. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we got a couple of mystics that kind of are in that area, that period. And maybe I don't know if we want to talk about them both or save one for maybe later or whatever. We'll see what time we got. But I think at first, maybe looking at, I guess the question first is, why did you do this? Why look at the politics of sovereignty and commons and class formation through the lens of Christian mystics, right? Who have this kind of necessarily, I don't want to say divorced perspective, but like an unusual one. Like they're not necessarily, in the weaving guilds, with like spears in hand and shit.
Yeah, they're not like literally doing government most of the time, right? They're not writing political treatises where they're saying like this is how society should be organized necessarily. Well, first of all, just because I'm a freak, that's probably reason number one.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. The state can't come between us freaks. That is kind of true. Yeah. But the other reason is really that I saw myself as living in a world where religious and sort of magical even beliefs, both visible and invisible to people, seem to be informing political consciousness. So, I mean, there's very obviously something like QAnon, right? But I think also the way that a lot of Americans just think about what the state is a fundamentally magical conception. There are people who think we didn't lose the Vietnam War in the United States, right? Like magical thinking is not foreign to us today, even as largely secular people, right? We may not be starting like UFO blowjob monastery cults, but we start our own. And,
Wait, we do start some of those. Wait, who's we in that sentence?
Well, I'm only going to speak for myself here.
Okay. You and I don't, but I mean, maybe some extended family. It's hard to know.
That is in New Jersey, right? Yeah, isn't it? Yeah. But there's also, I think, even, more secular versions of these sorts of things, like with the American exceptionalism I was talking about, or things like this. So in the Middle Ages, I thought mystical theology was a great place to go to think about these questions. Now, why mystical theology, you might ask, or maybe even what is mystical theology? Like when I say that, what do you think, Fritz? What does that bring to mind for you?
I am... Okay, well, honestly, my first thought would go to more like the 19th century, and I'd start thinking about like the Spiritists or the stuff. Because I love, I love psionics. I think it's a fun, weird ruling class, sort of far right coded thing. So, I mean, my brain goes there.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's totally fair because there is a sense in which that tradition is a descendant of the one we're talking about.
I think it is. I felt that way in a lot of points here.
Yeah, you should.
As like a sort of a, because it's also like the result of an attempt to reconcile some historical contradictions or great moments in like class struggle or something like that. Like for the Spiritists or whatever, these people, it comes out of, these revolutions in the 19th century and like the origin of species coming out and they just freak out, right?
No, that's an amazing point. And I think that Yeah, that's exactly where I was going to go. I mean, essentially, I think when people think about medieval mystics, they often think about people who are having crazy visions. Like there's a character who comes up in one chapter named Hadewig of Brabant. She's very famous for having these visions where she's like literally getting in bed with Jesus. Like Jesus is a chivalric lover and they are going to, enter union through this like very physical image essentially of them coming together. Right. But it can also just mean this mystical sense of scripture. So, for the more maybe evangelical Protestant listeners, this maybe is less familiar, but
they're called Americans, Chase.
Okay, so this is for all the Europeans and Asians and others listening to Africans listening to the podcast. But in Catholic, Orthodox, these kind of older Christian traditions, there's this thing called the fourfold exegesis of Scripture. I'm not going to bore you with what that means, except to say that the mystical significance is sort of the overarching, most special significance, but it also tends to be kind of hidden, right? It's the thing you kind of have to work to figure out. It's like, when I'm reading about what Jesus does to the fig tree before he goes to his crucifixion, it's not just him destroying the fig tree. It's actually a code for like how it is that I'm supposed to act with respect to, the fruit of God's kingdom on earth or something like this, right? It requires all these steps. So mysticism is kind of a thing that both reveals and obscures in that way. And it seemed to me that sovereignty is exactly that. It's this thing that is supposed to be very clear. It's supposed to be like, who has the monopoly on violence? Who gets to decide all of these things? Who creates the state between us, or what is the state between us, if I can pitch your show. But
I appreciate it.
No, of course. But at the same time, it's totally opaque. I mean, like, and we'll see that when we talk about Norwich in a minute, like, this is not something that even today is always really obvious. I mean, I live in a small town here in New Jersey, and like, if you decide that you want to, I don't know, put a fence up between you and your neighbor because you're a good American and you hate having to look at other people, like, are you going to be beholden to your homeowners association? Is it going to be the municipal council that you have to deal with? Is it maybe going to be just the opinions of your neighbors who sort of exert a non-homeowners association based set of pressures, right? Like, it's not always clear to whom you're supposed to owe allegiance or who is in control in a given situation, especially in the Middle Ages. So it seemed to me that there was a real kind of consonance there. Yeah.
Okay. But I guess that still asks the question, like, why see that through the lens of mysticism specifically? Yeah,
sure. So everything in the Middle Ages is necessarily baked with religion, right? So you're not going to find a treatise that's, totally just a sort of a secular unpacking of what's supposed to be happening. Even the political treatises we have called Mirrors for Princes are basically just like kind of like Jordan Peterson type books, but for aristocrats, right? So they're like, this is how you're supposed to act. You should, when you're courting a lady, do it in this way. And when you're, waging a campaign, do it in this way.
Yeah. When you're cutting off the head of a peasant that wouldn't let you inside.
Yeah. When you're harvesting cattle from someone for getting married on one of your manors, here's how much you should take. Because goddamn them for asking to get married. Fuck them. So you're not going to get that, right? For the most part, they're always going to make references to Jesus, to being a good Christian, and so on and so forth. It seemed to me that mystics, who are by and large these people who live apart from society, I mean, they can live in cities, of course, as these figures do, but even if they live in cities, they tend to live in some walled off way. So Julian is an anchoress, Marguerite Peret is a begging, and Jan van Roosbroek is a chaplain or chantry priest, and then a prior. You guys don't have to know what these things mean. The point is that they're not just a normal part of society. And it seemed to me that gave them a kind of special position to think about these things.
Yeah.
Both because they're in the world while not being of it, but also like kind of Uncle Ted style. You know what I mean? Like, you take time apart and it gives you a certain perspective on society as it functions that you wouldn't have when you're kind of actually there in the middle of it. I also just want to throw out there, not that anyone should care about the quote unquote intervention of my dissertation, but this is like an argument I'm making that these can be read as kind of political or socially critical documents. They tend to be read in purely religious terms, sometimes as like literary documents. But my goal has been to say, like, not so fast. Actually, we can learn a lot about how these people thought about sovereignty through how they write about their mystical theology.
And also why it is they're writing these things in those moments. Because that's what for me was also really, I mean, we'll see this now, but this is, I think what caught my eye. But it made me think about this anthropologist from back in the day, Edmund Leach, who wrote this textbook on structural anthropology, in which he said something like, being kind of curmudgeon-y, he said something like, if there's one concept I would eliminate in anthropology, it would be the concept of religion, but I would keep politics, is what he said. And it made me kind of think about, it's a provocation. It's meant to be that, but it made me think about your work here.
I appreciate that, because there is this kind of movement in the sociology of religion to see religion as this almost like artifact of an earlier point in sociology and anthropology, that like finding a definition of religion that's going to fit Shinto and Mahayana Buddhism and spiritualism and Catholic Christianity is nearly impossible.
Like send the word the way of the word tribe. Like,
yes, yeah, exactly.
It doesn't do anything anymore. Toss it. But I don't know. Where do you fall on that?
Well, I think it tends to be. Well, let's say this. I'm a good medievalist, so I have to start with the etymology, right? I mean, what kind of hack would I be if I didn't do that?
No, hit me. I love that shit.
So in the Middle Ages, religio actually refers to being a member of a religious order. So it's like being a Benedictine or a Dominican, or being a priest who's who's a canon at a cathedral, which is just a special kind of priest. And so religion there means like a specific way of life. And ironically, that is probably closer to something like a definition of religion that's workable sociologically than trying to make it this like overarching thing we can think about, where there's like one thing called Orthodox Christianity and one thing called, Theravada Buddhism or something, where instead you can think of it as sets of practices that are adopted by communities that can have meaning-making capabilities. I think the reason that sometimes gets pushed back against is that non-theists, or the Richard Dawkins crowd, if I can be sort of barbed about it, don't want to think of themselves as like sharing in a term that's associated with people they don't like. So I kind of view it as like, if you have to use it, just universalize it. Like think of anything that acts as a set of structuring habitus sort of practices as something like a religion, Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's do it then. Okay. So let's do it to Norwich. Norwich in the 15th century, at one point in your telling here, is, as far as I understand it, essentially ruled by three different political forces. We'll say that.
Yes.
That each of them sort of managed to function as overlapping states that sort of are separate from, but also overlapping on each other. And there's also like changing class relationships happening in this urban setting as well. And the all the while, you have got this phenomenon of the Anchorite. And maybe you could talk first about what that is, because I mean, we've kind of already maybe mentioned it. This is like the oracle in a box situation here. But I guess, one thing that struck me, maybe a place to start, was that the Anchorite that you focus on, Julian, one of the rituals that she probably had to go through was her own ritual death.
Yes.
That separates her from society. Like, it's maybe a place to start. So how did this fucking zombie oracle take on this insane, like, I don't even know what to call it. I mean, I want to call it like a city state, but like, it's more like urban proto states.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Maybe let's start with the city and like what feudalism is or isn't as a way of getting there. And then we can, I think knowing that will help to make more sense of the Anchorite phenomenon. Yeah. Okay.
Excellent. Class formation, baby. I love it.
Yes, exactly.
So E.P. Thompson this.
Yeah, we're about to get down there. We're going to be doing a little Christopher Wickham. He's a contemporary guy at Oxford who's kind of good on this stuff, sort of Marxist inflected. But so feudalism is one of these terms that if you ask a lot of academics about it, they'll get very mad at you for using it because it doesn't exactly mean what we usually think it means. I'm going to use it because I think it's useful, much like I think using the word religion can be useful in certain contexts. We tend to think of it as meaning like this highly hierarchical society where, Fritz, you come to me in the beginners in the mountains and you say, I want to settle on this land. And I say, you can settle on it, but you've got to give me 30% of the, huckleberries that you grow on your brambles in the beginning mountains. And when you get married, you have to give me a cow. And when you die, your kids have to give me 1/10 of the parcel of land back. Like kind of this rentier system based on land.
Yeah.
Right. That's what we tend to think of. It's a little more complicated than that, in part because nothing is ever that simple, right? But also it makes us forget about towns and cities, right? It makes us forget that these things still existed.
Yeah. What's the percent though of urbanization then? It can't be more than like 10%.
Oh, very, very low. Extremely low. The exception is going to be in the Low Countries. Contemporary Belgium and Netherlands and northern France, and then northern Italy. These are places that, believe it or not, at certain points in this period are like almost half urbanized. So they're
different world.
Well, and one of the reasons for this is because it's all swamp, right? So like at a certain point, you run out of swamp to drain and you're like, oh man, I can go be a weaver in the city in this like proto-factory workshop.
Yeah.
And I can make wages, right? So that's kind of the first point here. We're talking about Norwich, but there is a similar system there. Wages exist in this period. So you can be a wage worker. It's not unknown, right? Money is in circulation. However, this being a medieval city, it falls victim to a lot of the kind of competing sovereignty problems that you would find in a rural area. So I'll give a rural example and then maybe that'll help us understand the city. You, Fritz, are living on a manor. And a manor is basically just a big plantation estate. I mean, not a southern antebellum style plantation, but it's got fields, it's got little, hamlets on it, it's got little villages throughout it. It's a big tract of land, right? You could be a serf on there. You could be a free person, which means you owe rent to the Lord, but less rent than you would owe otherwise. You could be a serf who owes a ton of rent. Think of it almost, I don't love the idea of techno-feudalism, but you could almost think of it as like, do you have to pay to use your toaster or not? Like some people are paying to use the toaster. Some people are not paying to use the toaster. Some people, their car payments, they have a higher credit score, so they can get away with lower car payments, right? The kind of tenure that you have affects what you owe in taxation and frankly, how prosperous you're able to be.
Right. Okay.
Your lord could be like the person above you, could be a knight, could be another peasant who's just become really good at doing exploitation, right? It could be a noble, an aristocrat in the way that we would think of it. It could be the church, right? You could live on the lands of a monastery and you have to go like shoe the abbot's horses, every 6 months as a labor obligation. Right. They're also filled with these kind of informal economies, obviously selling things like ale to other people.
I mean, how else are you going to fucking deal with these nobles?
It's not great out there, folks. It's not great.
Yeah.
So in a city, you actually end up with a very, very similar problem, right? Where there is a thing called the city of Norwich that like has a city council that, acts more like what we imagine a city does. It has aldermen. The aldermen are elected, right? Like you might think, oh, it's the Middle Ages. There are no elections. No, they have elections. They're deeply rigged plutocratic elections, but they do have elections.
Oh, so same.
Yeah. Okay. So, the more things change. And actually some of what we're going to talk about with Julian has to do with that. But just outside of the city, and let's be clear about this, outside theoretically is demarcated by these walls. But it's not really that simple because the monasteries that are outside the city, there's a nunnery and there's a monastery. It doesn't really matter what they're called. They have existed since before the town was a city, right? They've been there a long time. They would
have been, tell me if I'm wrong, but they would have kind of functioned as regional markets as well.
Yes.
No? Or like, So these were town centers before there were towns to center.
Exactly. Well, you can think of it almost, I don't know the exact history with Norwich, but you can think of it almost as if one of these hamlets that I mentioned on a manor earlier, right?
Yeah.
If it grew to be big enough that it kind of took on a life of its own, and then the local people there appealed for a charter to the king or whoever to be able to incorporate a city. This is something very important to understand. These are legal corporations, whether you're dealing with a monastery or you're dealing with the town itself. The technical term actually is universitas, university. So universities are the same thing. There's kind of this one legal category in the medieval period for like all of these bodies, whether they're monasteries, cities, manors, whatever. They operate their own courts. They have their own political forms, whether they're ruled by an abbot or elections, but they're all kind of one thing, which means they all kind of have these individual versions of sovereignty that could be totally different. Like I don't know. Have you ever seen a movie? Oh gosh. Oh, it's gonna bother me. I literally watched it like 2 days ago. It's a movie with Dan Aykroyd from 1991.
Oh, wait a minute.
It takes place in New Jersey. Nothing But Trouble.
Oh God, have I seen? Let me just look at a picture and I'll know if I've seen it. Nothing but.
I promise
Trouble.
this is going to be super instructive for all the listeners. Bear with me.
I definitely have not seen.
You need to watch this movie. It's actually the first movie appearance of Tupac Shakur with the Digital Underground.
Really?
Yes, it's definitely got some issues, but it's a fun movie. It's about a really rich banker who goes off the road on his way to Atlantic City with 2 Brazilian heiresses and a woman he wants to date. And they end up trapped in this like New Jersey coal town ruled by a 106-year-old like vampire guy who is the quote unquote Shire Reeve. Like they literally code it as like a medieval thing where he just executes you for anything. So if you run through a stop sign, he just executes you using this roller coaster that spits you into like a lawnmower jaw. It's crazy. Like that's kind of how it works, right? Like you could actually just go a few feet and end up in a totally different legal system, essentially.
Yeah.
And this is a huge problem when these are not even necessarily contiguous, right? It's like one lord could own manors that are totally not contiguous in any way. And that's going to happen in cities. So you've got these disputes over boundaries that are going to arise throughout the period. And the big 3 players in this are the Cathedral Priory, which is, you could think of that as like the main priests at the Norwich Cathedral. These are the guys who slash
UFC fighters.
Yes. Yeah. And they do enjoy getting into a couple brawls inside the confines of the church. There is the city itself, which is, with the aldermen, and they're kind of rich and they levy taxes on the market stalls and so on and so forth. They're your patrician class, right? And then there's a group of nuns at Caro, which is just outside the city. And they're nuns. They live on their kind of bucolic area, but then they also have, fields that abut the city, right? And that means that, like, imagine a situation where somebody kills a cow on the line between these 2 areas. Like, who's going to get to settle this in court? Or who has the right to collect taxes on a good sold in a particular street, right? In the city. And that's just going to lead to like literally 300 years of bloodbath. Like
that's just chaos.
Yeah, just like it really has more in common with like the Years of Lead or like the McKinley assassination than it does with like like the contemporary city in the United States or Europe. Like what right-wing people think like migrants do in cities now is like actually what is happening in the medieval city a lot of the time. Just chaos. Just chaos. Yeah. Oh, Anchorites. Sorry, I was supposed to talk about Anchorites.
All right, so we got the Anchorites mixed in all of that.
Yes.
And let's talk about the Anchorites. We're going to talk, and also we can specifically talk about poor Julian, or maybe not so poor. I don't know. She wanted to do it. It's her thing. It's not my thing. Whatever. People like those little tiny boxes that you can sleep in Japan too. So, I'm not going to judge. Tiny houses is like a whole YouTube genre. But so you got it. You gave us the conflict, the 3-way, the multiple way battle for property, rule, sovereignty.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about class, which is also
and that's and on top of that, some of these political boundaries get even more complicated when you've got economic groups seeking representation as themselves. There's battles in the streets. Okay, but we got the Anchorite staring at all this from afar.
Yes. So what is an Anchorite? Maybe I'll say that. So we've talked about monks, right? What is a monk? It's someone who sells themselves away in a community, right? We call that, I'm putting in my teacher voice, Cenobitic monasticism, which just means
I know Cenobites.
Well, they might have been doing a little bit of that. They do like whips.
They seem a little monastic in the bad way.
There's a book, if listeners are interested, they can check out YouTube for it. It's called In Praise of the Whip by Nicolas Largier, which is about sort of this question. To what extent are Cenobites? And let's just say they're praising that whip. But anyway, so that's one kind, right? And then there's also what's called eremitical monasticism. So hermits, right? These are guys who like wander out into the woods. Very famously, there's a guy named Peter the Hermit who starts a very anti-Semitic crusade that goes through Europe and ends up getting slaughtered outside the walls of Constantinople by the the Turks.
Well, fuck around and find out, Pete.
Yeah, big ups to Erdogan for taking care of Peter the Hermit. But in any case,
ancient man.
Yeah, sorry. But in any case, there's a third kind that doesn't really exist anymore. They don't really make it out of the Middle Ages, to be honest. It's a very kind of medieval form of spirituality.
Not a lot of people did.
That's true. So here's the thing. England, this kind of lifestyle is actually very, very, very popular in England for some reason. And scholars are not totally sure why. There are all sorts of explanations. Some people think it's because it's a relatively well-contained political unit, right? Like the Kingdom of England is contiguous in a way that like the Holy Roman Empire is not, or that the Kingdom of France is not. Right. It might have to do with socioeconomic conditions, but in any case, it's a person who decides to seal themselves off in an urban center. So you're doing the hermit thing, but you're doing it in the middle of everyone. And
okay.
I need
like
you to think
an anchor in a sea of people.
Yes. And I need you to think about like what kind of person chooses to do that, right? Because if you're now to be fair, for a woman, it's going to be harder to be like a wandering hermit. I mean, it's not impossible. There are figures like Marjorie Kemp, who actually met Julian of Norwich, who are basically that kind of person. But it's harder because, of course, women's movement, not as free as men's movement in the period.
Yeah.
But I think it takes a certain kind of person who both wants to be in complete contemplation, right? Like they just want to be like, I'm alone with God 24 motherfucking 7. Like I am going to live in a box where I get a little window out to the street and I get a little visor I can look through that lets me see the Eucharist in the church. Like that's all I'm going to see. Some of the nicer ones had servants and cats and these kinds of things. They weren't totally alone. It's a COVID lifestyle, but without like Netflix. You need to be, I think, a very specific sort of person who want to do that. Very religious, almost certainly someone who is from an urban area already or used to urbanness, right? You're not going to be like an aristocrat who lives on a farm all the time who decides to drop anchor in the middle of a city, right? That just doesn't really make a lot of sense. And third, you're probably going to be someone who's at least a little bit gregarious still. Like there's a text from a couple centuries before this period called the Anchorite. I just love getting to say Middle English. I'm sorry. Can't help myself. It's beautiful.
Lay it out.
Shout out to Robert Eggers, whose next movie is going to have Middle English in it. But this text is about like how to live as an anchoress. And it's written for, we think, 3 sisters. And so much of it is consumed with being like, don't gossip too much. Stop chattering with yourselves. But I know, and it's misogynistic. I mean, to be clear, he basically says, don't cluck like chickens. Like it's not.
It's still the church and the Middle Ages.
Yes. But the point is that like, just because someone makes a decision to do this doesn't mean that they're like an inhuman monster who doesn't want social connection.
Sure.
Yeah. And so Julian is a very particular one of these who lives for a very, very, very long time attached to St. Julian's Church. Now, you might have caught something there. And that's that her name is just the name of the church. And that's because we don't know what her actual name was, because the anchoresses would just be named after the churches they were attached to because they were dead to the world.
Crazy.
They didn't have names anymore.
They were given like a funeral that they watched.
So they would sprinkle you
it's
with
like a teenager's dream.
It is a little Sylvia Plath, which is kind of what I like about it. It's very, so what they would do is they'd have this rite where the bishop or a bishop's representative would come. And just to be clear, that's a big deal, right? Like a bishop is not hanging out all the time. That's a guy who comes for like special moments. And they would literally like rub dust on your forehead, do the office for the dead for you, and, put you in a shroud, to signal your death to the world. And then they would wall you off in this little chamber, usually attached to a church. Now, again, you could have servants. There were things that made this not like 100% you were alone. But the symbolic content of it was very, very like, Uncle Ted style, to go there again. Like very like, I want to be alone. I am no longer a part of the world. And I guess part of my research really arose out of like, how is that possible? How can you have a dead person who's attached to a church, which is the lifeblood of a community? Like, let's be clear. Churches in this period, they're for religious services, but they're also going to they're going to have theatrical performances in them and right outside of them. They're going to have market stalls outside of them or in the plazas around them. Like, these are vital instruments of the community. They're not just a place you go once a week. So like, she's there. She's still in the community. She's just like the boy in the bubble, So she writes this text called A Revelation of Divine Love at some point. We're not really sure. Some point in the late 14th century. And it is a series of visions. It's got a lot of cool stuff in there. There's a point where she says she sees all of creation in the form of a hazelnut in her hand. What is it? The quantity of a hazelnut is what she says.
Sorry, how were they for psychedelics back then? Because I feel like I've had that same vision once.
Wait, you know what? Let me tell you the next one, and I think you'll really be sure that you've had this vision before. So all of this vision, she records vision she had. These visions took place when she was dying of an unknown disease. And when they call you in, and by the way, she's wishing to come as close to death as possible so she can be like Jesus. That's a big part of this.
It seems like a big mission in her whole life was just to be as dead as she possibly can.
Yes. You're spot on. In a way, I mean, that is sort of the medieval goal. I mean, what is a crusade? But hey, if you get killed by like a Turkish guy, you go to heaven.
Die good.
That's the deal. You got to die and you get to go. It's great. But anyway, she's staring at a crucifix. So when you're dying, they do last rites. I'm sure you've seen it in a movie. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And they hold the crucifix in front of her face. And she says that she concentrates on the crucifix and it comes to life and like starts moving its face and writhing in agony. And that's where all the visions come out of, this like moving crucifix on the root cross. But she also says that around it were the faces of demons and that she couldn't look away from the crucifix because then she would have been like basically scared to death and taken to hell by all of the demon faces like haunting her from around, right?
Damn, metal.
So that's the kind of situation we're in here. And I've definitely seen a few things like that in my time.
Sure. Yeah. Location is important when you're taking psychedelics.
Do not look in the mirror. Do not look at the crucifix. No. But in any case, in this, one of the visions I concentrate on here is called the Parable of the Lord and the Servant. And you read about this in the dissertation, I think, Fritz.
Yeah.
Basically, this is a vision she has about how it is that humanity got so fucked up, right? Like, as Christians, you kind of have this problem. And the problem is, okay, God is good and he made people to be good, but also they screwed up somehow. And like, why would they screw up if they were good and God made them good? It's like, what's going on? Like, why is sin a thing? Like, shouldn't God have just made us good and like hung out with us? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, there's a bit of an issue here. And so she wants to explain this. And she claims to have a vision where essentially there's a big dude on a throne. He's looking pretty hot. He's got like a silk garb on. He's sitting in peace. He's looking very stately. He's looking very courteous is the term that's used. And courteous is just a word that means like courtly, right? It means that you're a good lover. You're a good fighter. You're sort of a Don Juan character. You are kind to people. You're generous. You're chivalric would probably be the closest thing to the term that we have now, chivalrous.
But that's also a class component to that, isn't there? I mean, that immediately implies
1,000,000%. You cannot be a courteous peasant. That isn't it.
You mean a villain?
Yeah, you're
a villain.
Yeah, thank you for saying this. This is important. The term for a peasant or one type of peasant is villan, which gives us the word for villain. It's like that's what these people thought of peasants. There's a text called the the De Amore. Usually called like the art of courtship, I think in English. I think it's Adrianus Capellanus. But anyway, this is a book about...
Do we call it How to Win Friends and Influence People?
Actually, it is much better than that. Because it might be a satire. Like, we're not 100% sure, but like it's possible that he's like making fun of this kind of shit.
Let's go.
But the setup of the thing is like, okay, if you're from this class, this is how you romance a lady of this class. If you're from this class, this is how you romance a lady from this class, So it'd be like, if you are a lord and you're trying to get with a lady, you'd be like, you have the milkiest, whitest, longest neck I've ever seen. And she's like,
come on.
Your unibrow is so sexy, like that kind of thing. And then if you're like a middle-class guy, you're like, you buy her like a nice pillow to put on her couch. And she's like, I am an economic engine. I enjoy this, this kind of thing. But when it gets to the peasants, they're like, well, these people are pigs and they're actually not capable of romance. So like, you don't need to worry about it.
Word. Damn.
So that's either a joke, in which case it was a view current among people to get made fun of, or it was like actually the view of the writer, in which case So there's a huge class component to this. Thank you for reminding me of that. On the other hand, there's someone who comes up to this throne and he's in tattered garments. This guy is like, he looks like he is working in like an oil field in Nigeria on like a Chevron plantation. Like things are not
would have been
well
difficult then, though,
to work in an oil field in Nigeria.
Yeah,
that's true. Most of these guys were probably doing turnip farming, but which, I love a turnip. I'm a root vegetable guy. What can I say? It's my Slav likes to come out and get sort of turned on goulash and root vegetables. But in any case, one guy's really poor, one guy's really rich seeming, right? Poor guy runs up and the rich guy's like, yo, do me a favor, go do this thing. And the poor guy gets so excited. He's so into this. He just runs off, doesn't check that his shoelaces aren't tied, and falls into a pit. And does a sort of like, if you remember the old Family Guy bit where Peter gets in the fight with the guy in the chicken costume, and then at the end, he like hurts his knee and goes, for like 35 seconds.
Oh, yeah. It was a meme forever.
Yeah. And I just want to apologize to listeners for mentioning Family Guy on the podcast.
Accept your apology.
I will be accepting in praise of the whip style punishment as payback.
Flagellation.
But you can, we'll bring it up on the tavern talk.
There we go.
You can, here's the thing, subscribe, and there will be, if we can get 10
live
new subs,
flagellation.
There will be live flagellation if we can get 10 subs coming off of this post alone.
That is suddenly a very different kind of podcast. I have to check the terms and conditions on Patreon about that one.
This is now hosted on OnlyFans. But
yes.
In any case, he falls in the pit, and the Lord is like, come on, what's wrong? Like, I still love you, and gives him kind of a hug, and is like, it's okay. And then boom, he's got beautiful garments on. He's hanging out with the Lord. And it turns out that he only thought that he was distant from the Lord, but he actually just fell into the pit because he loved the Lord so much, so very, very, very much, that he actually, fucked up. Sometimes you screw up because you love too much, not because you love too little.
This is the parable?
This is the parable. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so this is her explanation for why humanity fell, is basically that it loved God so much that it fell, and God was never mad at humanity at all. In fact, everything was always copacetic. It was just humanity's incomplete view. It's sort of like neuroticism about its own inability to love God. Like, humanity already loves God enough. It's just that we're really neurotic about it and don't understand.
Yeah, we turned it up to 11. It wants to be like a nice 6, 7.
Yes. And, or, let's say this. We loved and it almost like we're going to get hit with some cyber stalking charges. Like, we need to be loving like a nice courtly romance sort of way. And we're loving in a Villanish way, right?
Yeah.
And this poor character is supposed to be Jesus, right? Both Adam. I don't know how familiar listeners are with medieval Christian theology, but there's this idea of the original Adam and the second Adam, and Jesus is the second Adam who makes up through his death for the original Adam's fall, right? Now this figure is called homely, and homely means sort of like domestic, warm. It has a very peasant sort of connotation.
Yeah.
And my argument in that chapter is that if you look at what's going on in Norwich, where you have these battles between these different guild groups, where you have these battles between these different corporate groups. So one thing we haven't really talked about is that there are so many riots in this period that on multiple occasions they have to appeal to the king or to different kind of authority figures like the Duke of Norfolk to come in and be like, all right, guys, we need to calm this down, right? You guys cannot be
This place is falling apart. It's like, chaos. Real chaos. We're
trying to move wool through here right now. Okay. The wool is not moving because you're killing each other and we don't like it. And it's great. They're accusing the other factions of rigging elections. There's a point where one mayor candidate wins and is like, well, yeah, I lost. But, like, they were just going to steal it anyway. So I had to steal it from my side. Like, it's cool.
Hey, I know that guy.
Good. And then my favorite moment in this is not in the dissertation, but this is a little one for listeners. In 1450, basically, like the Masons take over and that solves everything.
Anybody with a plan, really.
In right around 1450, this group called the Guild of St. George, which is basically just like a fraternal organization. Like, it's not tied to a particular profession, right? Because a lot of these guild groups are like, we're the Carpenters Guild, we're the Pin Makers Guild,
they're monopolistic and as well. This is just some sort of like loose mutual aid fraternity, like funerals and that kind of stuff.
This is interesting to talk about. So the guilds actually develop very differently in different places. So in England, they tend to actually be organs of the state, quote unquote, more or less, because they form at a later point. So by the time they're formed, they actually get sort of created often top down as a way of organizing labor to the ends of the local authorities. So, for example, I'm blanking on which town it is, but there's a town who has a 15th century set of guidelines for, I think it's their pin makers. And which crazy, by the way, that I love that the pin makers as a group of people, the few, the proud, the pin makers.
I mean, you don't want to fuck around with pin making.
You really, really do not.
Especially when like disease is rampant.
Yeah, hit you with poke you with a few holes and then hit you with the shit bucket, and you're not going to make it very far. No. But in the literal bylaws of this guild, it says that the mayor can basically change whatever he wants, right? Uh-huh. So like that kind of guild is more or less the equivalent of like the sham constitutional monarchies that come out of 1848, right? Like, okay, they're sort of like, oh, you get representation, it's real, but it's not real at all.
Exactly. Yeah.
And even if the mayor isn't intervening, the group of masters, so guilds are composed of apprentices, journeymen, and masters. And masters tend to own these workshops where they employ journeymen and apprentices. And a lot of these journeymen are literally like weekly or even day-by-day wage hires. So they wait outside of, on the church plaza, much as a contractor worker might wait outside of Home Depot today, that they can get a couple days worth of work. So there are major kind of class differences even within the guild organizations. But so the conflicts that arise between these bodies are immense. Oh, the Guild of St. George. So the Guild of St. George is not one of those, just a social club. And basically, after a huge dust up in the middle of the 15th century, they bring in this really good kind of like negotiator. And he's just like, well, what if everyone just joined the Guild of St. George and we united it to the town? And like the government just became the same thing as being in this club. And they're like, oh yeah, that's pretty sick. Like then we have like an organization to define who's on the inside and who's on the outside.
But why would they agree to that? Like, why would because again, the whole reason for these conflicts is because they're struggling for the sovereignty, right? Exactly that. Like, that's the reason why they're fighting. So why is it so easy for them to just, is it because these guys are somehow economically disinterested? Is that the idea?
So no, the reason that it happens particularly with the Guild of St. George, I mean, after this, I'll give you an example from the Low Countries that will show you that it doesn't always work out this way. But the reason it worked out this way in Norwich in particular is because there had been so much tumult. Like things have been going downhill for so long. They get to a point where there are essentially two major guild organizations that are warring for control of the city. These are more like Mason gangs. Like this is more like veiled prophet shit than it is like carpenters unions, right? Okay. They control massive assets. They have members throughout the various other guilds, right? These things are not exclusive. Like part of what allows them to be so powerful is that they are almost like an urban machine that can say, okay, well, we've got a bunch of the carpenters on side. We've got a bunch of these guys on side. Okay. At the same time, the division that takes place in the city government doesn't align neatly with the two large social fraternities. So like there are guys from the Guild of St. George on both sides because these are also patronage networks, right? These are also just like guys who pay money to their goons, like to their soccer hooligans. So after they battle it out, there's this huge election. They go back and forth. One of the candidates basically gets jailed and then calls in help from outside. That help from outside liberates him and then basically pushes down on his enemies. They bring in the negotiator and then they use the Guild of St. George as almost like the truth and reconciliation process.
Okay.
Right? So like, he was in the Guild of St. George, but so are many of his enemies. It just became a convenient way to like create or kind of absorb everything into one social organization. That meant that when he retired, there would be this kind of succession process. So that literally what ended up happening is the second that you stopped being mayor, you became the head of the Guild of St. George. So like,
I see.
Like they literally built it in that the former mayor would immediately be in charge of the organization that ran the city. So it just created a kind of civic thing. But that's after Julian dies by about 40 years.
So she's in like the shit.
Oh, she's in like the
it's going down
shit
out there.
It is just constant. Like you need to imagine, someone coming by her window to gossip. She's like, oh, I probably shouldn't be talking to you, but whatever. And they're like, did you hear that they killed a woman in the church yesterday because she claimed sanctuary? And the city guards are like, you don't get sanctuary in here, and just killed her. Like, and she's like, oh, that's doesn't seem very Christian. That doesn't seem very good.
Are you sure?
Or another great example is that the bishop who would have buried her, Bishop Dispenser, the Episcopus Martius, which means the warlike bishop.
Oh, God. That sounds good.
Let's just say not a great guy. One of the cardinal rules of being a bishop or a priest in this period is you don't use weapons. You can get other people to use weapons as much as you want. You could hire as many goons as you want to hire. But you yourself.
Loophole.
Yeah. No, that's what it's all about. What is religion without a loophole? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
He literally leads a crusade into Flanders. By crusade, I just mean he attacks Flemish people. It's not.
Okay, it's more of a pirate raid.
Yeah, it's really. Not he's not actually crusading. It goes horrendously wrong. Horrendously wrong. But he literally leads troops into battle. He's just against other Christians, not even in a way that would have been even remotely acceptable to his contemporaries. He also is very famous for persecuting Lollards, who are this ill-defined kind of dissident religious group that is becoming more popular in this period that isn't really talked about in my work, but is very, very important. They are, some would call them proto-Protestant, but the reason they're coming up here is because Bishop Dispenser has a thing called the Lollard Pit, which is where he...
Oh, damn.
That's where he's putting the Lollards after he executes them. And
Does it have to be a pit, or can it be any sort of receptacle?
No, it is a literal pit.
Okay.
It's a place.
Now that's a pit. Well done.
That is just down the street from where Julian is located. So, I mean, she's probably hearing the screams of Lollards as they're, and there's no reason to think that she was necessarily a huge fan of this dissident group, right? She's very Catholic. She's very loyal to the church hierarchy. But just because you're loyal to the church hierarchy doesn't mean that you get on with them all the time, right? I think an important thing to understand about medieval Christianity is that the church is Christianity to 99.9% of people, which means that even if you're disagreeing with it, you're going to couch that disagreement in terms of that institutional structure. It's a little bit like reformist politics, being a social democrat or something like this, right? Now
you've got the vocabulary you got. I mean, you literally can't have, which is why I think the mystics are interesting, is because these are people that are, like everybody else is, working within a well-defined sort of vocabulary system of social life that, that is just the lexicon available to everybody.
Yes.
But these people are trying to break it somehow.
And yes, that's a great point. And it's why that homely courteous thing I mentioned earlier is so important. What she's doing there is taking these two terms that are polar opposites, both in terms of their class meaning and in terms of what they imply about a person, right? Courteousness.
They're impossible to each other. They're you can't. No, you can't be both homely and courteous in material life.
No, and certainly not in medieval society, right? If we think of it as a social phenomenon, you're never going to describe someone as both at the same time, right? It's just, it would be like calling someone a communist fascist or something. I mean, I guess you could call someone that if you're criticizing them or something, but you know what I mean.
There are some movements.
Okay, bad example.
So they're doing some third position stuff.
Yes, Julian is a third positionist. Basically, my point. I mean, in a way, she is, just not in the way we mean that term.
There are very different positions, people.
Yes, she is trying to develop a sort of a third position, we can say, and it is this idea that God is this way, right? God is somehow both chivalrous and distant and majestic, and he's sitting and he's at peace. And it says specifically in the text that he sits in a city of peace. So he's also identified with this urban structure. But on the other hand, he's like you. He's a laborer. He's homely. He's got a tattered jerkin on, she says, right?
Yeah. Smells bad.
Yeah.
Looks like shit.
Stinky, caked in mud, gross. God is both of those things. And so the argument implicit there is that the ruler should also be those things. And I think that we need to, this is where I can maybe think about this in terms of mysticism. For her, this is like a utopian vision, right? This is like...
Right. I was going to say, this is, I mean, it is a no place. It's like an impossible demand somehow, no?
So on the one hand, I think she wants that. That's what the end of history is for her, which is the mystical reading of scripture, right? The mystical reading of scripture is about how it is that we live towards eternity. So in that sense, she's imagining a political mysticism, literally what does the end of history look like politically? But on the other hand, she's also responding to a real social situation. I think she wants a just judge to come in. And, ironically, not too long after she passes away, they're going to bring in, I just love this personally because it's kind of fun, for all of my Agincourt fans, all my fans of the Battle of Agincourt. I'm sure there are dozens of you out there.
Yeah. Well, let's hear them.
Sound off in the comments if you love Agincourt, how you feel about longbows. But the commander of the longbowmen on the English side is brought in as one of the chief negotiators afterwards. And they end up, another little tidbit for you here, sealing the deal on Valentine's Day. And it's one of the first mentions we get. It's not the first, but it's one of the first of signing the deal on Valentine's Day as a way of signaling the need for fraternity and sort of love between people. So these arbiters are also very real forces, right? Like they're a real thing. I'm not saying she's thinking about those people, but I think she's imagining a situation in which those kinds of people would have, come through.
Sure.
And frankly, the Guild of St. George kind of works out. It's after she dies.
Like that.
It is kind of what she wanted. Maybe without the homeliness, she probably, but
well, that's right. I mean, like that's the kind of, the thing that I want to say is revolutionary about thinking like this is that somehow imagining, I mean, okay, it's now we're in 2025 and, we have correct critiques about like fetishizing workerism, the sort of nobility of struggle, that kind of thing. Okay, but we're not talking about now, we're talking about like the 15th century where nobles don't really struggle. They don't work. They're not, you know what I mean? Like they have forces that engage in direct violence against people. And those that she's calling homely are definitionally stuck there forever. Like because of who they are homely for good. And she's saying that, and this is where I felt like maybe there's a spark of the idea of humanity in some of this, is that when she's imagining God, she imagines a person that where these contradictions no longer make sense. Even if she sees it in this, okay, like we're talking about a spiritual ideal, utopia, but nonetheless, she's acknowledging that they're contradictory and then finding some kind of like resolution. Like it sounds like a dialectical approach. And
really, I do need to give a shout out for all of those interested. One of my dissertation advisors, I'm so sorry to do this, wrote a book called The Birth of Theory that is sort of about the relationship between mysticism and dialectical thinking. That kind of shit. He doesn't. Right. He talks about it mostly in terms of academic theology, whereas I'm thinking more about these closer to,
theology.
Yeah. Like ladies walled inside, cells to death, a little slightly different. But I do think that is kind of the difference here, is that Julian is close to the people in a way that those academic figures wouldn't have been. And I do think that gives her, if not a totally conceptually different perspective than some of the academic thinkers my advisor might have looked at, Andrew Cole, but it gives it a stink of reality, if that makes sense. Yeah. There's a sense in which I think she legitimately cares about these people. And I think it comes through very strongly in probably the most famous quote from her text, which is, all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well, which is basically her way of saying that the contradictions do get resolved, and in a complete sense. Now, she's talking in a utopian way there, of course, but she believes it not in just a notional, like, I'm a noble who is maybe worried about going to hell, so I'm going to invite a couple of beggars to my feast to like do alms, right? Which is a thing that nobles would do. She's imagining a situation where the humble worker, the homely person, is quite literally raised to the status of courteousness through this interaction with God. And in that sense, she's transcending any simple understanding of, we just have to wait till the end of time. Because in her mind, she's actually narrating something that's already happened historically, right? For her, Jesus has been incarnated. That has already happened. So she's not just projecting into the future. She's necessarily talking about the present.
Yeah. And also acknowledging, and has to acknowledge, the change that is that the things are moving, things are changing, and that there is, an outcome that's different than the present. Exactly.
That's a great, just real quick, and I'm sure maybe you want to move on to Roosbrook or whatever, but you make a very important point there that I want to kind of just really highlight. People probably think of the Middle Ages in these very big terms. It's not something everybody really cares to learn about in any great detail. It's, basically 1,000 years long. But a lot of things happen in that period, and especially in an urban context where, like, you are getting riots pretty frequently. You are getting open violence between street gangs pretty frequently. It's going to make it so that someone understands the reality of change in a way that is going to be, I think, harder in an agricultural environment where there is this sense of being tied to the land that, goes on generation after generation. Because a lot of these cities are filled with migrants from the countryside. The death rates in medieval cities are very, very high. And we didn't mention this, but Norwich is the second biggest city in England at this point. So it's, it's maybe only 15,000 people, but for England in that time period, that's pretty gigantic. So
yeah. And it was attached also. It's away from the coast, but it is a port city, right? Like it is accepting trade and cargo from abroad. And so it has these international connections as well.
Are you ready for the transition of the century here?
Oh, yeah.
I got the only place in England that had anything resembling Bacon's was Norwich. So it is, in that sense, the most European city in what is now England. Yeah.
Okay. That is the transition of the century.
I think the promise of flagellation is going to be the main draw for the episode. We'll see. We'll see what they do.
It's worked for Christianity this long, right? Why change it?
Well, yeah, it's funny because we're not going to talk about Mersvin, the guy sent you to talk on, but
that was wild.
Some flagellants do come through town when he's hanging out in Strasbourg. He's like, you guys stop competing with me. This is my town.
Get the fuck out. Yeah, this is my oil.
Take it somewhere else.
I love it. Okay. All right. So we transitioned to the bit. What do we call them again?
The beginis.
The beginis.
Yeah.
The beginis.
Yeah. Los beginis. The begins.
Give us the real one though, because
it's Begins or Begins. Begins or Begins.
Begins. Okay. Yeah. And these were these lay societies that were sometimes really well integrated into urban environments that in a way that wasn't as, separated from life as these anchorites were, right? These were more socially integrated.
They are Cenobitic.
Integrated people. Cenobitic. That's right.
Yes.
We're back to the Cenobites.
Yeah. The pinhead has just emerged into the market in downtown Brussels. We'll see what happens.
I would watch the shit out of that.
Yeah, somebody should do that. Yeah,
Hellraiser medieval. That's
medieval
pretty close
Hellraiser.
to Army of Darkness, though, and stuff. Isn't it? That's kind of
but what if you did it so that like the Cenobites, like the medieval people, are too extreme for them? You know what I mean? Like they're like, oh no, like we can't. These guys are a little too. They're a little too BDSM even for us.
Bit too much. Yeah.
They're doing a ceremony where they're dusting her with ash and wrapping her in a shroud and saying she's dead. I think I'm going to go back to. What's it, the hell dimension? What's it called in Hellraiser?
Just stab her with a hammer. What are you doing?
You're taking it too far. But actually, this is an apt comparison because the Begins and Beghards, which are the the Beghards or Beghards, which is the male version of a Begin.
Sure.
They are very scary to medieval people because they're thought of as being very like sexually promiscuous. So
okay.
Now, why is this? Let's think about your options if you're a medieval person. You can be
okay. All three of them.
You have none. No.
Rich, poor, dead.
So basically, right, the classic breakdown for medieval society is those who pray, those who fight, those who work, right? So that's your peasants, your knights or lords, and your priests. Now, in terms of priests or religious, there are basically two kinds. There are three kinds eventually, but there are monastics. They're hanging out either in a community alone or alone by themselves. There are regular old priests, just guys who are at the church and do the kind of stuff you imagine a priest does. They say mass, whatever.
Yeah.
Then later on, there are friars. They're kind of like in between. They live in organized communities, but they go out and preach in urban areas mostly. So they're kind of like the Middle Ages religious response to urbanization, right?
Yeah, sure.
That's what they're all about. That's St. Francis of Assisi. He's probably the most famous founder of one of these friar orders.
Oh, but for the church I went to,
yeah, honestly, Francis of Assisi pretty sick.
He liked the animals.
He's got the stigmata. He loves the animals. Yeah. There's a good movie about him by noted sort of fascist collaborator Roberto Rossellini called The Little Flowers of St. Francis. Check it out. Anyway. For women, you don't really have that option, right? It's either you're a nun or you're a nun. like if you want to go into religious life, there are no priestesses. There's no like Like today, if you're Catholic, there are sisters who like teach in schools and like walk around with people. Like they don't have to stay in their convents, right?
You know what? It hasn't changed all that much.
No, it hasn't. But I mean,
Catholic
like,
Church.
You can like be an uninhabited nun who like goes to the grocery store. You know what I mean?
Now you could be a fucking, Protestant of some kind if you wanted.
That's true.
There wasn't an option here.
That's true. Yes, I was thinking about in terms of like religion in the medieval sense, right? Like joining a religious order.
Yes.
But you are right. So that's your only option. And those orders do tend to be pretty strict in terms of like you are not taking many visitors. You're not taking many male visitors, especially, and you're speaking them from behind a prison grate most of the time.
Yes. So,
not really the best option. And a lot of the times you can only get into those if you're already rich, right? Because like your family's got to pay to put you in there, right? Like they're not just going to like take you, right?
Amazing.
So this pagan movement arises as kind of a third way for medieval women who want to be involved in religious life, but also want to be a part of the world. And so they're these they come in many different shapes and sizes. They're eventually standardized in some places to basically be nunneries, but not all of them are. And the ones that aren't are more or less these little intentional communities that exist in cities, often around a kind of charismatic female leader figure. And what's interesting is a lot of them are labor-based. So a lot of them will be weavers or things like this. They have jobs.
This is what's curious to me is that they kind of have this feeling of being to whatever the traditional nunnery or monastery was to, let's say, agricultural serf lands or whatever. These feel like they are to the emerging middle class, the emerging market class. Merchants and so on in the cities, no? Because they kind of take some of that on themselves, some of these rational production methods. And
that's an amazing point. And I think, let's talk about weavers, okay?
Yeah.
So
the radicals.
They
all
are.
The way, also big in Jersey. You're in like radical weaver territory.
I am. We're in
historically.
No, we are in, we got Patterson. We got it all here.
Gaetano Bresci, baby.
Yeah, it's funny that like stays the case for a really long time. Because in the Middle Ages, the weavers are basically thought of as like the anarchists. Like they are the most radical group in most cities. And which profession do Beguines tend to be a part of? Weaving. Very, very important. Now, why is weaving so important, and why is it that they tend to be radical? Cloth is basically what makes contemporary capitalism possible. I know that may sound insane, but I mean, genuinely, you get vast urbanization in two places in the Middle Ages. You get it in what is now sort of like Flanders and or what was then Flanders, the Netherlands, Belgium, northern France. You get it in northern Italy. I talk about this based on these social historians named Jan Dumoulin and Leen Bervoets. I call it the larger Flemish economic area, which is, great. Who doesn't love such a fun term?
The old LFA.
Yeah, the LFA, which, is like the Schengen zone for the Middle Ages. It is.
Oh, okay.
All
right.
It's like this, you can imagine a crescent that sort of extends from Eastern England down, through Belgium, Netherlands, down the Rhine, through the side of France, through the side of Germany, into Switzerland, down into Northern Italy. That is your most urbanized part of Europe. It's also specifically, and now why is it that way? Because it's full of rivers. Right? Rivers are how you transport goods quickly in the Middle Ages because going overland is very, very hard. Now, cloth is basically the wool comes from England. It gets put together in Flanders and then it gets finished in various other places along the route and it gets sent down to Italy. That's the basic paradigm. That means that you can kind of never have enough weavers, right? There is simply more cloth than they know or more raw material than they know what to do with. I should also clarify.
Have enormous bargaining power if they organize.
Enormous. And let's be clear about this. This is a deeply segmented process. I think a lot of people don't realize this. Specialization is already a major thing. Like what you might think of as a product of the Industrial Revolution is already very, very much happening in this period in these places. Yeah. So you've got fullers, drapers. You've got obviously the weavers we've already talked about. You've got clothiers who are basically middlemen merchants who organize the production of the cloth and then sell it on to the actual merchants who will carry it down to these major market towns. So the clothier is kind of like a middleman, an organizer, right? And they were successful enough that they would literally build workshops where women would come to work. There's a great moment, and often women, I should say, men did this too, but weaving was often done by women. So you have women earning wages, less than men, but they are earning wages. Anyway, there's a great moment in, I highly recommend listeners check this one out. Fritz, are you familiar with the Chrétien de Troyes?
De Chrétien de quoi?
De Troyes, Troyes.
Non.
Oui. Some consider him the first novel writer. I don't know if that's true or not, but he writes these medieval romances. And there's one called Yvain, or The Night with the Lion, about Yvain. They're Arthurian romances. And I promise I'm going somewhere, listeners. You're going to love this.
Where a dude bangs a lion?
So he doesn't bang a lion. He befriends a lion.
Well, let's read between the lines.
Well, he does go crazy and get naked in the wilderness and is rescued by a lion. So you can tell me what you think about that. But there's a great moment in it where he breaks into a factory where a bunch of women are enslaved doing weaving work and liberates them. So this is like a thing that they're doing in this period. There's also a great moment in his Lancelot of the Knight of the Cart where Lancelot has to ride in the cuck cart to save Guinevere, but that's a different issue. If medieval people loved anything, it was an Arthurian fanfic. But in any case, weaving is such an integral part and such a kind of almost quasi-industrialized process that if you're one of these Begins and you're active in the weaving industry, you're going to have actually quite a bit of power with respect to how things are being accomplished in these areas. So you're kind of being hit from two sides. You're economically suspect, right? Because you're probably a part of a radical subversive organization. But secondarily, you're a woman who is like kind of a religious woman, but also not at the same time. And they don't really know what to do with this. And so there are all these like stories about, there's a very famous one about a male version of a Begin, a Beghardt, who pretends to be a dead aristocrat and uses it to have sex with the guy's wife. Like there are all these like fears that like they're going to come and have sex with you, basically. Because they're considered like licentious because they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. Like this is a hierarchical society. You are supposed to fit into certain kinds of pre-agreed upon paradigms, right? So there's something. Also,
am I wrong that they're also kind of geographically itinerant often? So they're also mobile, both socially and like they can also just kind of pick up and leave, or are they actually bound, like this guy's story tells to these?
So this gets complicated. So Begins exist as both itinerants and as communities. The itinerant groups are outlawed by these things called the Clementine Decrees in the early 14th century. Because they're perceived as spreading this thing called the heresy of the free spirit.
I get it. No need to explain.
And the heresy of the free spirit doesn't really seem to have existed in the way that the church thought it did, but there were these ideas floating around that were about like, yeah, man, like just kind of, let your freak flag fly,
Yes.
And Marguerite Perret, who maybe we'll talk about more in the Tavern series or episode rather, she is associated with that group more, right? The other kind of Begins kind of become socially absorbed to a certain extent and over time become kind of just another version of a religious order to the point that actually some of them survived, if you can believe it, all the way to the early 20th century. So there were Begin groups in like the Netherlands until like maybe 120 years ago.
And they weren't just like in doing work related to the market. They were also doing hospitalization services, right? And various itinerant care for travelers, things like that.
Maybe this is a good point to bring up here, and maybe allows us to talk about them in relation to guilds.
Yeah.
There is this ethos in the Middle Ages, a genuine one that people believe. You do have to try to take care of people. Obviously, they're very bad at it. They have no sense of medicine. The amount of money people leave to these organizations is dog shit. Like, they're not doing a good job, but they do try. And a lot of this work is going to be done by these quasi-religious, quasi-social organizations, like Begins or like guilds. So guilds would run hospitals, Begins would run hospitals. You can view them, again, I think the easiest way to view these structures is like, there's only one thing in the Middle Ages, and it's just like the universitas, the communitas, these like corporate structures. And whether it's a guild or a Begin group or whatever, they're all kind of the same thing.
Which is why the itinerants are problematic, because they defy that corporate structure.
100%. And because you don't really know like who they are. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like,
right.
Cities are full of migrants, but they're usually migrants who are looking to stay, who are there for like economic reasons. But if a woman shows up one day and start preaching that actually God has chosen her since the beginning of time to be saved, and that that
she's part of a new class of person, and
she's actually better than you, and you suck.
Yeah, and also you owe her some food.
Yeah, exactly.
So get on that.
Like, you're going to be like, I don't know about all this, and then somehow she gets 3 different like academic theologians to be like, this lady rocks.
Yes, we're talking about Marguerite Porete.
Yeah, and you're like, how did that happen? Like, like, she must have been really good if she got 3 different academic theologians to sign on. Like, she basically got like, I don't know, Cornel West, Jordan Peterson, and like, I don't know.
You got to finish that trio because you got a weird mix started there already.
Michael Parenti. We're all signing off.
Oh, damn! I was not expecting Michael Parenti in that trio. I'll give it to you. Yeah. Nice.
But they're signing off and like, this lady kind of rocks, and then the other bishop is like, I don't know if she rocks real good. And to be honest, she gets, and we'll talk about this later. I'll just give a taste here that she gets imprisoned right around the same time that Philip IV suppresses the Templars for doing gay stuff and Satanism. So,
nobody likes fun.
Well, the Knights Templar apparently liked fun, and that got them in a lot of trouble. Yeah. So, the Knights Templar were doing the Temple of Blood, and so they got in trouble. It's what happens sometimes. But anyway, maybe we could talk a little here about the special significance of the Low Countries and all this stuff. And that might be kind of a good place to leave it off.
For now.
Yes, for now. Listen, I could, unfortunately for your listeners and you, talk all day about this, but the Low Countries, hyper urbanized, like I said, and that leads to even more civil unrest than we get in Norwich. And part of the reason for this is that the guilds there are not organs of the state. They're not founded late as they are in much of England. They're founded very early. We have guild charters that go back as early as the late 11th, early 12th century in some of these places. So this is very, very old. I mean, we're talking right now about the 14th and 15th centuries. So these things have already, existed in nascent form for 100, 200 years in some places, right? Now, these guilds could be for anything. There are merchant guilds originally, and then there are various craft guilds, blah, 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 like we've been talking about with weavers. And at a certain point, the craft guilds are like, hey, these urban patricians are running all of these cities in a way that doesn't really make any sense to me because I'm doing all this work. Like, what's up with that? And they develop what I think we can only describe as sort of proto-union tactics to deal with these things. And I don't know how you felt about this, Fritz, but I was totally shocked when I first learned about these things. They're like, they're doing walkouts where they'll literally walk out of the city itself to just refuse work. Yeah.
I mean, like the word strike goes to like the 17th century or something like this, right? Like sailors striking, but these are legitimate strikes that you could recognize in the modern context as completely modern labor strikes.
Yes, and they're doing them in very different ways. So there's the one where they walk out of the city, it's called an Utgang. God, Dutch is such a silly language. You've got those. You've got another one where they'll sort of like gather outside of the business on the town square in the kind of market area and just stand there with their banners and like saints images. And just sort of like, because they have livery, right? They'll be wearing like their outfits. They like to kind of dress up for these things. And they'll just like shout slogans, intimidate potential scabs, things like this. They do another version where they just run through the city brandishing their arms, like intimidating people. They have, some of them have.
My grandfather used to think all unions did.
Well, the ones in Paterson, New Jersey were, but that's a different story.
Well, fair enough.
But they were very active, right? And this quite literally leads to these like bizarre civil wars in certain contexts where you get these bizarre class relationships where like the local aristocrats who are not very powerful, right? You need to understand that these are so urban that like feudalism, as we think of it, doesn't really exist. Like there are still knights and stuff, but like they're not really powerful in the way that they would be in, England or France or something, or the Holy Roman Empire. And so like they'll actually ally themselves with factions of weavers or fullers or, another guild to fight with the merchant guilds who run like the, wholesale shipping economies of the towns. So you'll get brief periods where like the weavers will get a seat on the city council because they like allied with a knight whose faction wanted to lessen the power of the merchants.
Okay.
They'll get, yeah, I know it's really crazy. There's
Deep
even
politics.
very interesting things where like they'll force a situation where the city treasury has to be kept in a box where there requires 2 keys to open it. And one guild, like Weaver's Guild, will get 1 key, and then the Merchants Guild will get another key. So that like literally they can't get into the city's funds without the consent of the Weavers. Things like this.
All right.
One of my other favorite things they do are secret strike funds. So they'll do like religious gatherings. We have like complaints about this from city documents. Well, where they'll say things like the merchants will say things like, they claim it's a religious gathering, but we know they're just gathering money for the next time they go on strike to do mutual aid. Like they say this, they know this is happening.
Yes.
So these guilds get away with a lot. And I mentioned this only briefly in my dissertation, but there's a great moment that has a lot of consonance with the Masaniello story, actually, if I can bring it together. So
episode 6,
you get this crazy thing called the Great Flemish Revolt. I just want to make sure I get my years right on this, because otherwise I'll feel really stupid.
Yeah, you don't want to mix it up with the pretty good Flemish Revolt.
So it's 1323 to 1328, which is, actually basically during Roosbrook's lifetime. So he would have experienced this. But again, we'll talk about those individual figures. I think
we haven't mentioned him yet.
Yeah. He's the Dutchman who appears in my dissertation, the perfidious Dutchman. So this crazy revolt. I mean, it's literally been called, there's a great book on it called Plague of Insurrections by William Tebrake, who's an anarchist social historian at the University of New Hampshire. Cool. And it's the only book on the topic that I'm aware of that treats it in any real detail. But it's this amazing moment where essentially there's an ongoing civil war between the Duke of Flanders, which is like the wealthiest part of Europe, and the French king. They get down to it. Things don't go that well. And it opens up this political space for this massive peasants' revolt that becomes so powerful. They actually end up forcing a series of aristocrats to help lead their armies, much like with Masaniello. But unlike Masaniello, they don't just take over one city. They take over almost the entire Duchy of Flanders and develop these peasant communes throughout these sort of like based on local peasant traditions. They're almost like, the Narodniks? Something like that. Like they're these sort of like peasant.
Go to the people kind of thing. Go to the land, go to the people.
Yeah, but they are the people. So I guess I more mean like, they're very interested in, they are organized based on peasant communes is the point I'm making. Like they take the rules of their villages and they make those the official rules for the various sort of little hamlet states they set up all throughout the duchy. Unfortunately, they are betrayed by their aristocratic allies.
No.
But
who would have seen that coming?
What is interesting though, is that before that, they do manage to take several cities and actually align themselves with the merchant elites of those cities, some of whom actually fight with them more or less to the end. So they do develop this almost like proto-bourgeois revolutionary sort of trajectory at a certain point.
This is how this stuff is getting negotiated, I guess.
It is. And remember that a lot of the people here are peasants, right? So they're going to get joined by some of the weavers from within these cities, right? They're like, or some of these urban dwellers are, they don't have class consciousness necessarily in the way that we'll think about it in an industrial period, but they obviously understand that their oppressors are the same people as are oppressing these peasants. They're dealing with famine. They're dealing with taxation issues. Yeah. There's a huge climate shift happening at this point. This is before the Black Death, but that's going to kill between 1/2 and 2/3 of the population of a lot of these areas, which is going to create labor havoc after this point. So there's a lot of things we haven't talked about that are kind of sketched at the edges that are going to allow for a greater degree of solidarity between these groups simply because they're enduring a lot of the same problems, right?
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I guess I just want to make the point that revolution or that revolt fails. But I mean, I think Tebrake calls it the most successful peasants' revolution before the Russian Revolution.
It sounds fucking fascinating.
In Europe,
I would definitely read on that.
So for me, to bring it back to like, why did I write this, right? We haven't talked about Roosbrook. We've dropped the mystical element a little bit. We can talk more about that later.
But that's true.
But it's fine. True. I don't mind that.
It remains a mystery.
Hey, this is why you're the host of the show. But like, I became interested in what is the relationship between these people who are writing in the midst of this social chaos, who historians have generally received as these apolitical, just kind of like head in the clouds kinds of people.
Yeah.
And they're being perceived as, somehow they're alone. And, you could say, okay, well, they're not writing about this stuff. But here's the thing. Chroniclers in the Middle Ages write about this stuff, right? Like, there's a division of sort of intellectual labor that takes place here. If you're a guy who is known as a mystic who lives just outside of Brussels after spending 40 years in the city itself, you're not going to write a chronicle of Brussels. Like, that's not who you are. You get paid to do that by a prince. If a prince is not paying you, you are not going to write that chronicle. So we have to find that outlet somewhere else. And my contention is that you can look at these mystical texts, these people who kind of occupy a very particular perspective, and you can use that to get a sense of this social chaos from a bystander who's very often thinking about it from this Christian perspective that implicitly, I guess I want to argue, gives them enough distance and frankly, in many cases, enough kind of like a humanism. Like, I'll just give a quick example here. Roosbroek, who's this Dutch, Flemish, or Brabantine rather, mystic who again keeps coming up, 14th century guy. He's very important for a guy named Hert de Groot, who founds a thing called the Brethren of the Common Life. And that Brethren of the Common Life, he's not the Brethren of the Common Life, he's the Devotio Moderna. The Devotio Moderna is going to be very influential on guys like Erasmus, who's one of the early humanists, guys like Thomas More, who writes Utopia and is an early humanist, or at that point, not so early humanist. So like, there is a way in which you can detect some of these kind of early humanist impulses here that I think do end up factoring into the kinds of utopias these people imagine, or at least the remedies they imagine. And that I think helps to attune them to some of these class antagonisms in a way that are invisible to their more aristocratic. Because if you read the Chronicles, it's just like, oh, the pig people, like,
Yeah. I mean, these people are literally immured from a lot of those interested prejudices that come from the class struggle at the time. I mean, and also, like you said, in Julian's case, she gets to hear the goss regularly from common troubled people that just need, a wall to talk to. Yeah. And this is, it's structurally, it adds up.
When they come to her for advice, like we know Marjorie Kemp, who I've mentioned before, Marjorie Kemp, who is this kind of important 15th century itinerant mystic. She does pilgrimages all over Europe. She gets really known for crying too much. Like she just gets too stoked about Jesus, and they keep throwing her out of churches because she's just like wailing in the back.
I mean, I get it.
She loves Jesus. She would really fit into like a Pentecostal situation today, I think.
I was thinking, exactly. Handle some snakes.
Yeah, she would have loved to handle some snakes. I'm not kidding. She would have. Marjorie's great. But she literally at one point goes to see, she says, Dame Julienne. So we know that she visited Joan of Norwich for advice. And
she was known.
Yeah, she knew who she was.
Big shot. Yeah,
like she knew that she was a wise person. And Marjorie Kemp was just like the daughter of a merchant from Lynn, which is like a town not that far from Norwich. So like, but that's the thing. She's not from Norwich. Like Julian's reputation was big enough. And I guess her reputation for holiness and advice were good enough that she's literally reaching people towns over. So, I think that is different than imagining what a court chronicler or someone paid by the king to write something is going to say. Like,
yeah, totally.
John Gower, who's a contemporary of Chaucer, writes about the Peasants' Revolt of 1381, which is in England, where they do some awesome stuff. That's where John Ball, do you know this phrase, Fritz? When Adam dove and Eve span, who was then the gentleman? You know that?
Don't think so.
God, I feel like such an asshole.
It's learn. Teach me things.
He's a priest who's basically saying like, it means when Adam was digging and Eve was spinning, who was a gentleman then? Like there was no aristocracy with Adam and Eve. So how could there be aristocracy now? So it's like a radical peasants movement. When John Gower writes about it, he literally talks about them devolving into the squeals of animals. Like he writes the peasants as beasts.
Yeah.
That is the kind of writing you're getting about these people. So if you want to know more about them and know more about sort of like how they factor into these political questions, you kind of have to go to the mystics or at least someone else. You have to look for this kind of orthogonal perspective because otherwise...
Or someone who sees them as people.
Yes. And that's not... And none of these figures seem to have been aristocrats. Like, obviously they're all privileged because they could all write, or even if Julian couldn't write, she probably could. She was at least like, she had heard a lot of stuff, right? Because a lot of texts are read out loud in the Middle Ages. She's educated in a certain sense. None of them are like dirt poor, but none of them seem to have been like hoity-toity aristocrats either. So that puts them in a unique position as well. Yeah. feel like I've blathered forever. Do you have any other questions for me? I'm sorry.
No. I mean, I will. Later in the month, we'll meet up for that. But no, I'm glad at least we got to fit some of the politics and developments in the Low Countries too, because it also puts into perspective what would happen in Norwich. But like, it just blows my mind how. I mean, I hesitate. I don't want to use the word advanced, but I guess you can talk about, lots of terrible things with that word. So let's say how the advancement of what would become the future ruling class elements of what we now live in starts so fucking early in that situation, when just like a simple cargo ship run away, you've got a completely different political economy chugging away, almost like it's in a different period. It's wild.
No, strange. I think that's really important. I appreciate that. I think if listeners could take away one thing from this, it's that if we want to think about how this applies to us or doesn't apply to us, I mean, there are things that don't translate properly, right? I mean, obviously, the state is a little better at holding onto its monopoly on violence in some ways, or at least historically has been. Obviously, tactics used to respond to strikes have become, let's just say, surveillance is more possible now than it was then.
Sure. COINTELPRO exists now.
There are all sorts of differences, but I will say that the similarities, things that speak to me, have a lot to do with, like, first of all, these modes of organization go back a lot further than we think. They're like, yes. My ancestors were Slavs in the Tatras, so I don't know if they were quite dealing with this, but the perfidious Dutchman's ancestors were dealing with things like this. The people of then dealt with these sort of seemingly random exactions in a way that's really making a comeback, not just in terms of how we labor, but in terms of like, I'm a guy who's an apprentice for many years, and then I become a journeyman, and I'm just tossed out onto the market to like sell my skills on a day-by-day basis to, whatever master wants to have me in his workshop, because there's a limited number of masters within the guild. And I can't become a master if I don't work long enough as a journeyman and set up my own shop, right? Like a lot of people today find themselves in that position if they get a college degree and can't find anything, or even if they don't get a college degree and they go to trade school, but it doesn't work out for whatever, like a lot of
So
these,
what you're saying is we need to bring back the Anchorite.
What? I mean, is that not what I am as the academic, the failed academic?
That's it, right. I had a feeling of that as well a bit.
Yeah, you can come to my burial ceremony next Tuesday, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm making it up. But
sweet.
Yeah. And this has been a blast. I mean, assuming that we're all good. Hey. I really can't thank you enough. Thanks to the listeners for listening, and deathphotopod at gmail.com.
Yeah, totally different thing. I mean, I don't know. Is there going to be any crossover in your interests on the podcast and in your scholarly background? Is that going to mix? We're going to do a medieval film month or something?
I would love to be able to do that. Sound off in the comments. I don't know. I think when you do the Middle Ages, you become very like self-conscious about it, because it's such a thing that has a reputation for either being really reactionary or for being unworthy of study. And so I think, when you never know what the appetite is going to be for those things. So,
I mean, also you're going to get gatekeeped by dudes that died 300 years ago. Like, it's got to be rough.
It can be a little tough. I think, those of us who are fighting the good fight to bring to life the labor organizations of the Middle Ages, rather than just allowing us to imagine people then didn't try and fight back against the forms of exploitation that they were that they had foisted upon them. I mean, if folks can take something away from this, it's that like there should be more medieval like stuff that's about labor organizing. Like I really wish there were more like D&D campaigns about, the Bard's Guild or something like that. Like I do think there's room to reimagine the Middle Ages and like how we think about it.
Yeah. And all of this stuff that we talked about today is well after the sundering of the elves, right?
Well, it depends on who you ask.
Okay.
There are different reports, different mystics say different things, but
sure.
I would say 75% are saying long after.
Okay.
About 25% are saying, actually, this is the sundering of the elves.
It's coming now.
Yeah, no, that's why we had so many mystics in the 14th. We didn't talk about that, but like this period is the big period for mysticism, basically about 1200 through about 1450 or so. So,
right.
It's not just that I'm choosing mystics for whatever reason. It's also the moment when they really become a big deal in the period. So, yeah. Fritz, thank you so much.
Hey, thank you, Chase. And we'll meet again soon, and we'll await your many productions.
Yeah. Yeah, if the book does come out, obviously pre-order it, but that's not available to anyone right now.
Pre-order it in your mind.
if you are a publisher, publish it and then pre-order it in your mind, please.
Yes.
But yeah, I really can't thank you enough. I hope it was at least,
problem.
somewhat to your liking, and
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to all you free listeners out there, keep in mind The State Between Us does have a Patreon where there is some exclusive content, and that will include recordings of tavern meetings that we do with people just like Chase here. And we've got options for patrons to kind of get involved in those, ask questions, participate in the live chats, things like that. But you just go check it out at patreon.com/The State Between Us. And also Chase's thing is going to be up at patreon.com/fuck.
Death Photo Pod.
Death Photo Pod. Just like in Futurama.
Yeah, at Cenobite.net. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. All right, man. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Fritz.
Bye.